Hi, this is Aaron Wilson. Another busy day in Texans free agency, including the trade market, which Texans general manager Nick Caserio is using to overhaul the offensive line, having already sent Pro Bowl left tackle to the Washington Commanders, exchanged for multiple draft picks, and sending Kenyon Green to the Philadelphia Eagles, fresh start for Kenyon Green, and signing Laken Tomlinson to be a new starting left guard, projecting him to play next to Titus Howard, who steps in for Laramie Tunsil at left tackle. And you look at what they did here today by trading for Ed Ingram from the Minnesota Vikings. Didn't give up a whole lot, 2026 sixth-round draft pick, and he's been a disappointment as a second-rounder. He was benched last season after 9 games, and he had a 9.3 pass blocking grade, his career low, in the opening game of the season. Allowed 6 pressures, 1 sack, dominated, manhandled by New York Giants stud defensive tackle Dexter Lawrence, a Pro Bowler, one of the best in the game. And you look at Ed, he's someone that was a second-team All-Southeastern Conference selection at LSU. He has some pedigree. He was a blue-chip recruit. He's from DeSoto, which is the same hometown and high school as Vaughn Miller. And I think Ed still has some upside. For those who've been asking, he's not the projected starting right guard. Right now, I would project Juice Scruggs to be the starter, and we'll see what happens in the NFL draft. But this is a depth piece added to the line, and we expect Kendrick Green to sign with someone else in free agency, possibly pretty soon. So a move to try to bolster the depth and give a player another chance. And he's from Texas. He's from LSU. Had some off-field issues in high school. Was later cleared of those charges, a sexual assault allegation. And he was indicted, but eventually cleared of those charges and reinstated to the LSU football team. Didn't have any other off-field problems that were known and hasn't had any issues in the pros. So a fresh start for him all around. To have Ed Ingram join this team, and yes, like Kenyon Green, one of the lowest graded blockers in the NFL in terms of pass rush and allowing pressure. So Pro Football Focus, pretty low grades, right around the 50s most of the year. And yeah, that's 100 would be good. And so he's basically got a failing grade from Pro Football Focus, which is an analytics site. Doesn't mean it's infallible, but it is something where they watch tape and they grade the plays and they come up with their own subjective opinion of whether a player made the block, missed the block, carried out their assignment. So Ed Ingram, yeah, this isn't a big-time move, but it's a move. And obviously, there's more moves to come. I'm told that the draft will carry a lot of offensive linemen, and they'll try to, build with young players and coach them up with Cole Popovich, the new head offensive line coach and run game coordinator, promoted as the replacement for Chris Strausser. And since we're talking about contracts and roster moves, here's one. I'll put out some news right here on YouTube and on Click to Houston in the morning. The Texans have restructured wide receiver Christian Kirk's contract, creating over $12 million in salary cap space. He was due a $15.5 million base salary, and they have, I'm told, done a max conversion into a signing bonus of $14.3 million, lowering his base salary to $1.17 million, and lowering his salary cap figure by about $12 million, and adding additional void years. He already had void years in 2026 and 2027. So a couple of things with this. They're creating more cap space, more financial flexibility to account for some of the new contracts that they've already agreed to that haven't been processed yet, that are going to be processed. And that's the way that they are able to manage the books. They didn't go into this with a lot of cap space, but like Nick Caserio said at the NFL Scouting Combine, he was pretty confident in his ability to create cap space. So he's already done a Nico Collins restructure. That created $9.8 million. And an Azeez Al-Shaair restructure, $6.33 million added to the books. So they've been doing it by adding void years and conversions of salary into signing bonuses. So the players, they're still paid the same amount. It's just all creative accounting to really prorate these cap impacts and to push their credit card bill down the road for another day. But the cap keeps going up, and you can always move money around I know everybody says the salary cap doesn't exist. It does exist, but there are ways to, if you're creative, like Nick Caserio, Andrew Brown, who is a salary cap administrator for the Texans, to move around money and to get things done. So good job by them, and that shows a good relationship, obviously, with the player. And he didn't have any more guaranteed money in his contract, Christian Kirk. So by doing this, you add some guarantees and a bonus for Christian Kirk, who's the new slot receiver, and right now the number 2 receiver on the team behind Nico Collins, their Pro Bowl wide receiver. A couple more contract notes on this deal. So I wanted to go over this a little bit. There are incentives for this deal, but there's also up to $500,000 in per game active roster bonuses that's expected to stay in the contract, a $500,000 workout bonus, and then there's what they call $3 million in not likely to be earned incentives. So here are the thresholds for Christian Kirk. If he gets 80 or more catches, he gets $500,000. If he gets 90 or more catches, he gets another $500,000. And if he gets 100 or more catches, which would be great for the Texans if he caught that many passes, $500,000. So $1.5 million for catches possible for Christian Kirk. He can also make $500,000 more if he has 1,000 receiving yards during the regular season. Another $500,000 if he gets 1,100 or more receiving yards, and another $500,000 if he gets 1,200 or more receiving yards. So not bad for Christian Kirk. And of course, the Texans would be happy to spend that money if they were able to get all of that done and have that kind of production. To me, one of the biggest stories of the day is Jon Weeks. Jon is now with the San Francisco 49ers. So he did a 1-year, $1.422 million deal with $200,000 guaranteed. He was the longest tenured player in franchise history, 39 years old. He wanted to come back. They made a decision that they're going to go younger with Tucker Addington, and they'll probably have someone else to compete with Tucker. They signed him to a reserve future deal. And he's one of the most reliable special teams players in NFL history. So he first joined them as an undrafted free agent out of Baylor. 15 years later, he leaves the Texans. He leaves a mark on the field for reliability, excellence as a snapper, and a willing tackler. It wasn't like the fastest guy, but he would get down the field, he'd make some plays. He was a good open field tackler. He was an underrated athlete. And Jon Weeks, total class act, great guy, always accountable. Something's going wrong, he's going to raise his hand and say, hey, that's on me. I could have had a better snap, I could have had better speed on the ball, whatever. Jon was always Mr. Johnny on the spot. And just salute him for all that he's meant for the franchise, on and off the field. A pillar in the community, great family man, and someone I have the utmost respect for. I've covered a lot of football over the years. I've covered some great special teams players, whether it's Matt Stover and other kickers in NFL history. Justin Tucker, when he was not in trouble with the law, with Justin Tucker during his prime years with the Ravens. So I've covered some great kickers. I've covered some great long snappers. Sam Cook, great punter, and now Jon Weeks, the end of an era. So he joins the 49ers. They replaced Tabor Pepper, who was their long snapper, and they move on. So Tucker Addington, who has snapped in some games, has some experience, is the new long snapper for now. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's the long snapper this season. See how it goes. They're going to give him an extended look at being the long snapper, and right now he's the only long snapper on the roster. So by default, he is the guy, and he's been good enough to get several tryouts and be signed by lots of teams and be an emergency snapper for the Miami Dolphins, among others. So he's been with the Patriots, he's been with the Dallas Cowboys, and now he's a Texan. So he's been with the Texans for a little while now, and we'll see how he does. He definitely has big shoes to fill because Jon Weeks is a legend in the long snapping game. So say goodbye to Jon Weeks, and this is one that the fans, you've kind of seen this on social media, they're taking it hard because Jon Weeks, one of the more popular players, especially for the longtime fans of the Texans. And I wanted to go back to the contractual things because a lot of people want to hear about what's next on the negotiating front, what could happen. I'm told that they are going to make an adjustment to Denico Autry's deal, so I expect that deal to change and to lower his cap figure as well, so they're going to manage the cap. There may be some changes to the deal. Don't know if it's going to be an extension. I think it's probably going to just be still a 1-year arrangement, but at a lower number. And they want to have as much salary cap flexibility as possible because, as you know, there are some negotiations down the pipeline as far as Derek Stingley Jr., who we expect to become the highest paid corner in football. Here's another one, and this hasn't started, but I think that this could happen. Danielle Hunter. And Danielle is, I believe, somewhat underpaid now at $25 million. Is probably going to make a case that he should be closer in salary and total compensation average per year to Max Crosby. I don't think he'll get anywhere near Myles Garrett neighborhood. That's a $40 million deal per year. But Max at 34, 35, I could see him getting somewhere in the 30s. Maybe it's 30 on the dot, maybe it's 31, maybe it's 32. But we'll see what happens with Danielle Hunter. Obviously, that's a big contract. They have to make a decision. How many years do you do? How do you structure it? What's the guarantees? But a very valuable player that lived up to his contract last year. And he's heading into a contract year after signing a 2-year, $50 million deal. Morton Ranch graduate, former track star, and just a stud athlete. You saw what he did, all of those moves, the Euro step move in particular, the spin moves that he has, the speed to power that he generates. The tandem of Danielle and Will Anderson Jr. is outstanding, and his statistics are way up there with guys like Max Crosby and Myles Garrett. So, yeah, a really good free agent signing last year by Nick Caserio, and someone that I think they'll stay in business with. I don't see this as being a 2 years and done type of deal, but we'll see if they can get on the same page financially. But this is something that I believe will be pursued, and it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Around the NFL, I'm hearing that Jamar Chase will become the highest paid wide receiver in the history of football. He's going to get $40 million a year, I'm told, and I heard that deal is getting close. So Cincinnati Bengals working on that, and the T. Higgins deal, $28 million. And with Hunter, if he does his deal before, say, a Trey Hendrickson trade or a Trey Hendrickson extension with the Bengals, right now, trade seems unlikely. They're asking for a lot. They want a first-round draft pick. It's unlikely to happen. The teams are not going to pay for that. So right now, nothing happening on the Trey Hendrickson trade front. And obviously, they're at an impasse with the contract. And he's got to make more. He's only going to make $16 million. He's got to be one of those $30 million a year guys too. Hendrickson, great moves. Absolutely on fire type of motor. So interesting to watch this edge market and how that is affected, because there's always a ripple effect when someone gets a new contract. Others want a new contract, and I expect Danielle Hunter for that to be explored, that scenario for him. And you probably saw Laremy Tunsil broke his silence after the trade and said goodbye to the city of Houston. Did not use the Texans' name in the statement, focused a lot on really how he felt about his time in Houston, where he was a 5-time Pro Bowl selection, a team captain, and a 3-time division champion, ultimately traded primarily for money and draft capital purposes. I would say those are the main reasons why Laremy Tunsil was traded. There's been way too much talk about him being some kind of bad guy in the locker room. I know there was a comment about some sort of toxic situation. I would say it wasn't great as far as the voices in the room. Chris Strausser checked out, should have retired. I think players had tuned him out. If you want to call that toxic, I think that's a bit much. That's a strong word. Was it good? No. And the performance on the field reflected that. But ultimately, it doesn't just come down to the coaching. It comes down to how these guys play. So I think there's got to be accountability all around coaching and blocking performance or lack thereof. And yeah, Laremy Tunsil, he played well. He was living up to the contract. It wasn't his greatest season. He backslid as far as penalties. And I thought he did a good job pass protecting. And the metrics, the analytics, they do bear that out. But yeah, in case you hadn't seen it, Laremy said he didn't know what to expect when he arrived. He felt like the city embraced him and his family with open arms. And he said it became home for him. And he felt like he grew not just as a player, but as a man. I know he did a lot for single moms. He was big on philanthropy, working with the Urban Enrichment Institute, supporting the Gracewood Foundation for single mothers, working with Second Servings, another organization. And he said he felt like the city is very special, very resilient, and very generous. So he thanked everyone. Heartfelt message from LT, as most call him, not Laramie. He's just LT. And he played LT. And now he'll take a physical with the Commanders on Saturday, and then the trade will become official, and the Texans will probably announce, along with the Commanders, the Tunsil move. Not expecting a press conference, expecting him to get back to work. I've heard he's very hungry, wants to prove something, that it wasn't a great idea to trade him. I think they felt like, I know, that this was the opportunity. This was the time to do it. You do it next year, and it's not the same, and they didn't want to do a new contract for him he's going to be heading into his 31st birthday in August. So they move on, and even though he allowed just 2.5 sacks last season, the Texans move on as well. And you look at other things that the Texans have done since last time we spoke. They did a Nick Niemann deal, good depth, special teamer, and a gritty linebacker, as you would expect from a guy from Iowa. Played well for the Chargers. Add something. Casey Tuhill has had some pass rush production in the past. He's going to be on special teams. He's a really big special teamer, and he's good at covering punts and kickoffs. He's a good edge rusher on third down. So another player added to the mix. I kind of feel like, and I've heard other people say this, for all their spending on defense, maybe they could have had a more expensive guard. Maybe they could have looked at someone like James Daniels or Kevin Zeitler. Those are legitimate questions, but ultimately they are where they are. They've done Laken Tomlinson, who's been I would say a declining starter, but a starter nonetheless the last couple of years. With Seattle last year, and before that, the New York Jets. But he was a Pro Bowler at one point, one of the best when he played for the San Francisco 49ers. So at least he has that background. He has that background with D'Amico Ryans. So they think highly of him. And, you look at everything that's kind of transpired here, with all of the deals. They did the Zach Thomas extension, which we expected. They haven't done, a ton else, other than the Nick Niemann deal and, an MJ Stewart 1-year deal for about $2.5 million. So they get some depth at safety. And, of course, the Mario Edwards 2-year, $9.5 million deal. And getting Laken Tomlinson 1 for $5 million. And the big trade, adding C.J. Gardner-Johnson, probably the best new player that they've picked up, an exciting player, and a guy that I think is going to add a feisty, hard-hitting nature, ball-hawking, instinctive player to a loaded secondary that really becomes truly elite to have a player like that. And they've added a lot on special teams with Jake Hansen and Tremont Smith, Tremont 4.33 speed. So adding a lot of depth, adding to the special teams, and bolstering an already strong defense. But this draft needs to be an offense draft. And I can't see any reason to not go offense with as many of these picks at the top there: wide receiver, offensive guard, offensive tackle, tight end. Dalton Schultz is heading into, what I expect to be, his final season if he doesn't pick things up after the way he played last year. So he's got to improve, and everybody knows that. So, that's just some of the things that are going on with the Texans. And, of course, we have the owners' meetings coming up in a couple of weeks. So we'll hear from D'Amico Ryans at the annual AFC Coaches Breakfast. And I hope to talk to Cal McNair and Hannah McNair about the state of the team, what they think about this offseason and what the Texans are doing in free agency. And also, of course, about the goal of renovating the stadium, and at some point meeting the team president, Mike Timone. So I want to hear his thoughts. His background obviously is in stadiums, coming from Legends, working with SoFi Stadium, working with Legends at AT&T Stadium with the Dallas Cowboys. So a lot to get into, and we'll have, I'm sure, some more activity in the weeks to come. Who knows, maybe we'll even have a chance to talk to a Christian Kirk or a C.J. Gardner-Johnson at some point in a press conference at NRG Stadium. But they were there today, taking their physicals, taking a few photos, getting a tour of the building, meeting the coaches. So some activity. And then in April, the off-season program starts. So there's some things on the calendar to keep in mind, including the league meetings. And don't know, if there'll be a whole lot of news at the owners' meetings. So last year, Cal McNair was unanimously voted as principal owner, taking over for his mom, Janice McNair. And he's already been running the team. This is more of a formality to add Cal. So now the Texans take the next step in the offseason, and they've made some moves. We'll see if they get involved with any more of the wide receivers. Haven't heard them linked. I get a lot of questions about Cooper Kupp. Obviously, they've moved on from Stephon Diggs. Still could be a team that's in the market for a swing tackle. I think that would be a good idea. I saw Charlie Heck sign with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1 year, $1.6 million. George Fant is still out there. Or maybe they would revisit that. I think he would really help them. I think if he was on the team, he'd be a starter. I think obviously, but they're looking to get younger, not older. But I definitely think George could help a team, whether it's the Texans or someone else. So a lot going on, and it's been busy. It doesn't feel like it's been only 2 official days of free agency. It's really 4 because it started on Monday morning, and it's been a lot to keep up with. But I've enjoyed it, and hoping that things slow down perhaps a little bit. That wouldn't bother me as we go into the next wave, where there might be some bargains, but we'll see how many signings they do. There are over 70 players. They have an off-season roster limit of 90 players. They have the 7 draft picks, so we'll see what the Texans do, how big of an undrafted class they have, and it should be an interesting off-season. So please keep it locked here. If this is your first time, please like and subscribe at the channel, and check me out on X/Twitter at @AaronWilson_NFL. I'm on Instagram at AaronWilson7128. I'm on television with Randy McElroy and Ari Alexander at KPRC2. And keep it locked at www.click2houston.com. Your free and very often, frequently updated home for Texans coverage. So we have quite a bit of articles. They're all archived. You can read all you want about the Texans. And I appreciate you guys. And thanks for the conversation and for taking the time to watch my videos.